Every year there are a bunch of games that everyone talks about, that even if they're not the best games of the year, they're the ones that everyone's got to play and react to. And we're going to try and sort out which are going to be those games this year. The first one we have gone for was kind of like the first next generation video game, which is Watch Dogs.
Yeah, so Watch Dogs is the first real next generation title. It's the game that was shown that really showed off the potential of what the Xbox One and the PS4 could do at E3 in 2012 and also last year.
The setup is quite interesting. It's kind of, you play a sort of super hacker in a alternative reality Chicago. Basically you have this terminal which you can hack into other people's phones, you can hack into the transport network, all of which to aid your sort of your fight against the man.
And it's a real modern fantasy. It taps into this whole NSA, some modern surveillance, privacy of your information, you know, stuff that we're feeling right now, that we're dealing with. So I think it has the potential to really tap into the zeitgeist in that way. Yeah. The other thing that it does that's very next generation is that it has a second screen experience on tablets. It also incorporates other players' actions into your game in multiplayer, and all of that is stuff that couldn't be done before. It's stuff that can only be done really now on the next gen consoles, which is what makes it exciting.
And is that going to work? Because it seems to be kind of like a tent pole of the next generation game design ethos, I think. So it'll be very interesting. So the next game is equally ambitious, if not more so, and that is Destiny from Bungie, who were the creators of Halo, which is, you know, the biggest science fiction franchise of the last 20 years.
The best explanation of Destiny I've ever heard is it's Star Wars meets Halo with your friends.
Yeah, which is
yes, please.
Which is really quick. Yeah, so how can that possibly fail? It has what is going to be one of the guiding themes of game design, I think, for the next generation, which is this idea of seamlessness between single player and multiplayer and co-op, and how they can all exist together in one world. There's no boundary anymore. You play your campaign, and within your campaign you'll meet other players and you'll form collectives with them and take on missions together. Can our broadband technology cope with that sort of thing?
And when last year we saw things like Grand Theft Auto Online completely buckle under the strain of people actually trying to play it, it'll be interesting to see whether Destiny can hold up.
Next one is The Witness, which is the quite high-profile indie project by Jonathan Blow, who was the indie programmer responsible for 2008's kind of breakthrough indie game Braid.
Possibly the game that started the whole modern indie revolution. If you listen to something.
If you listen to Jonathan Blow. This game is much more ambitious, and there's a feeling in the industry, could this be his Heaven's Gate? Could this be his big ambitious project which kind of breaks him?
So what Witness is it's basically like a modern day Myst, right? It's set on an island, it's a lot about puzzles and exploration. Nobody really knows what it is, which is one of the reasons it's so interesting.
Yeah, it's amazing how he's got away with that. There's a lot of hype about the game, but we don't know anything about it.
We don't. It's going to be really interesting to see. It also supports Oculus Rift, which is the modern resurgence of virtual reality.
Yeah, it's the kick-started virtual reality headset, which lots of indie developers have got on board with. And again, a big question this year is that going to take off? Is that going to be mainstream? A very, very different game now, and that is That Dragon Cancer, which is a really quite devastating kind of puzzle adventure written by Ryan Green about his son's terminal illness.
Better than the muted colors of this hospital.
It's very harsh. It's not what you expect from a video game, I don't think, but it tells us about where video games are going and what they can talk about.
Indeed. It's not going to be fun. I mean, fun isn't really when you're talking about a video game that's about dealing with cancer. And that's the thing about That Dragon Cancer. It's not about vanquishing cancer. It's not about beating it. It's about just dealing with it in your family. And I think that's very important and challenging territory for video games to be in.
We're looking at hopefully into an era where games are going to say so much more about our lives and and about our culture and about our society. And I think this is going to be really divisive because it's so personal and so intimate. Ryan and his family are very religious. Faith is a very important part of their lives, and they've tried to communicate for this in the game, and they've said this isn't a piece of Christian propaganda. It's exploring the idea of illness and family and faith. It's a game with a pray mechanic in it, so how's that going to work? Yeah. So it's interesting stuff.
I just want him to feel better.
Finally, something very different again. I'm not convinced by this, but you've tried to convince me. Witcher 3.
Witcher 3. This is Witcher 3's year. So Witcher 3 is a very dark, adult fantasy kind of Game of Thrones style. It's got lots of sex and violence. It's about morality, and the coolest thing I think about the world of The Witcher 3 is that basically everybody in it is awful. Kind of like in Game of Thrones. It's not Tolkien-esque high fantasy at all. It's very dark high fantasy from Poland, actually. We had Skyrim and we had Game of Thrones. Both of those have brought mainstream high fantasy back into pop culture, so I think The Witcher 3 being so incredibly ambitious and wonderful looking and cool and interesting is just perfectly poised to capitalise on all that excitement around high fantasy.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, because there is going to be an official Game of Thrones game this year by Telltale, who did the brilliant Walking Dead series of episodic adventure games. But I think theirs is going to be a lot more thoughtful, a lot more narrative-based, whereas Witcher 3 seems to me to be much more about living the fantasy of being within one of these worlds and actually chopping people's heads off and having sex with them. Not necessarily in that order.
Wow. I think one of the things about The Witcher that is it's always delivered really well on having a story that's worth telling, that's interesting and that's mature. Like mature, not mature, oh it's got boobs, but mature, like actually mature and interesting and complicated to understand. And at the same time being just extremely fun to play, brilliant sword combat. So I'm hoping, I've got huge hopes for The Witcher 3. It's my most anticipated game for next year.